I just realized I wasn't I wasn't recording, so I will just go through this introduction. I'm really sorry. Today it's a little bit of a foggy day, so I will just go quickly through the introduction, the description of the image, and through the code. Just 1 minute. In here we have an example of a bank where we have customers being served. And this will be when we're working with code, this is called the blocking mode or synchronous code. This means that we have a queue of tasks or a queue of clients as we have in here. And in order for these tasks to be served, to be processed, we have to wait for each task to finish, just like we have to wait for each client to be served. So in the bank, we have to wait for each client to be served and then move on to the next one. The problems arises when we have a client that might take a lot of time in order for him to be or her to be served, and the rest of the clients will have to wait in order to be served. So in blocking mode, in code, where we have like an execution of several lines, this might appear whenever we have some command, like let's say this imaginary command, that will block the code for some time. In this code, JavaScript starts executing commands from a top to down, and it has to execute its line before moving on to the next one. So at this point, we have a command that will pause the execution of the program for 1 minute, and so the rest of the commands will be blocked. So this is blocking code. Now, up to now, do you have any questions on what we saw and what I've just described? I really want this to be like perfectly clear. So if you have any questions regarding this example, please ask. So at any time, you can open your microphone or send a message. So we have a problem here. Like, why should we prevent the user from seeing the news or the time or the weather and have this blocking code stopping the experience? Now, what one might say, okay, why don't we take this code and put it, let's say, at the bottom? Okay, everything will be executed, and when everything is finished, the user will see the latest news, the time, the weather, and then we have this blocking code. Well, there are cases where you must execute lots and lots of lines of blocking code. For example, what if I want a different kind of a, let's say, trigger to happen? For example, or let's say, wait for click and show, I don't know. What if I want to wait for the user to click something, to click on a button, and then show him some kind of pop-up, some kind of informational pop-up, or do any kind of operation I want, any kind of task with after he clicks a button. In this case, and let's say we want another one. Wait for another click, show other pop-up. So in this point, we have this blocking code, which will, of course, block all the other lines. And I really don't want 1 minute to pass until I'm I want the page to be interactive. I want the user to be able to interact with the page and click on several buttons instantly. But I cannot do it because if I place a blocking code like this one, while I'm waiting for the click, nothing else will execute. Because as I showed you with the alert button, when the code waits for the user to click here, the rest of the codes won't be executed. So we will be waiting the user to click on one button, but the code that does something on a different button won't be executed. So the interface won't be usable. So we have a rather serious problem with this kind of code, this blocking code, that spends a lot of time on execution, either because we have something that takes time to finish, like this timer, or we might have another command, another type of blocking commands that take time is the connect to server and get, let's say, data from database. These are all imaginary commands, of course, as you can see, they don't exist, but let's say that we had a command that connected to a server, got some data from a database, and that was something that would be executed in, let's say, 10 seconds, or it will be a command that would take some time. All of these are blocking our application. All of these lines are blocking the next commands that need to be executed in order for the application to be fully responsive, fully interactive to the user. So at this point, the creators of JavaScript saw a problem. They knew that in, let's say, classic, let's say, old school programs, you would just execute a bunch of lines of code, you would get a result, and then that would be the execution of the program. But in front-end development, in websites and web application, the programs don't really run in this way, like run once and then simply get a result. In front-end, the application, the web pages are interactive. There's code running all the time. There's JavaScript running inside the browser all the time. While the web page is open, there are commands waiting to be executed, commands that are executing, and things going on. So we have an interactive page, and it means that the code is constantly running, in contrast to the one-time execution of the more, let's say, standard programs. So in order to tackle this issue, the programmers of JavaScript had to come up with a solution. So the solution to that problem, and I will now switch to the non-blocking code. The problem was that we had a really annoying customer, or at least a customer that took quite some time to finish the execution, or the time that needed to be served was a long, and we didn't want to block the rest of the clients. So the creators of JavaScript devised they thought of introducing what is called asynchronous non-blocking code. So they said, okay, we have to deal with this kind of situations, and we don't really want these clients to wait. So the trick they came up with is this: once we have a client that is that has a lot of things to done, that has some tasks that take some time to be, let's say, fulfilled, we get a manager and we take this client out of the queue. So, sorry. So this manager and this client, they move aside, they start to work with each other, like doing the paperwork and exchanging information, and the next client will very quickly move on to the teller and do some really fast task like withdraw some money. So in this way, we unblocked the queue from this client, which takes, let's say, 30 minutes. And the rest of the clients will now move really fast and they will be served really fast. So this is asynchronous or non-blocking code. The concept is really simple in this context. When we have some code or some client, as you see here, that needs a lot of time to do something, we take him out of the queue, we put him aside. And the reason why I'm going through this process of creating a story, because I really want you to understand these concepts. This is one of the most important concepts in JavaScript programming. Unless you get a good understanding of what asynchronous and synchronous code is, you really cannot move forward and work with JavaScript. Asynchronous code is everywhere and it's used all the time. And it's one of the hardest part of JavaScript programming. So we're going through the process of describing the synchronous and asynchronous code through an example of a bank serving some customers. So in this, at this point, we had this customer that really wanted to create a new account, and it took a long time for this task. So we put him aside, we took him out of the queue so that the rest of the clients can be served. And at some point, of course, the manager and the client will have finished their tasks. So let's say after 30 minutes and after a lot of clients have been served, the manager will thank the client, and the client will take all of the paperwork and the receipts and anything that they did, go to the teller, submit like the papers or the receipt, and then once he has the account activated, he will move on and leave the bank. So this is the concept of asynchronous code. And let's see it in action. So I will remove these commands. Okay, and I will create somewhere, let's say here, or let's say so so let's say that I'm back into the synchronous or blocking code, and I want a command. I create a command in JavaScript that will stop the execution and wait for 10,000 milliseconds. So this will wait for 10 seconds. And then after 10 seconds, I will display a special offer to the customer. So I want the user to go into the page and take a look at the page, and after 10 seconds, I will show him a special offer or a subscribe to our newsletter or something like that. But at this point, this timer that waits to finish and then display the offer is blocking the rest of the code. And as I've already mentioned, I have some really important things to show to the user. So this code is blocking the rest of my application. So at this point, I have a command that is blocking and taking too much time. I have a client that has a rather, let's say, important or task that takes some time. And the JavaScript creators decided to make this command an asynchronous or non-blocking command. So whenever we have some kind of command that is blocking the code, we introduce asynchronicity. So we make this command asynchronous. And you can think of this asynchronous command as being, let's say, taken out of the queue. Let's say I'm pushing this command to the side so that the rest of the execution of the program continues. So I have this command that was blocking the code from top to down. I make this command asynchronous, and then the rest of the commands will be executed immediately. These are console logs. They take just a few milliseconds to be executed, so we will see everything instantly. But right now, I have a problem. I moved this command outside of the queue, and I have the rest of the code executed, but this command will be run instantly after I push this command aside. And I don't really want to display the special offer to the user unless 10 seconds have passed. So at this point, the JavaScript, let's say the creators of JavaScript need to find a way to execute this code after 10 seconds. So in a way, they must execute this code. They must take this code out of the ordinary execution line, let's say the timeline, make this asynchronous. So we take these commands outside of the main timeline. Chronos, syn means plus along with in Greek, and chronos means time, okay? So everything has to do with time. So at this point, we take these commands outside of the normal, let's say, timeline, and put them aside, and they start working on their tasks. So in some way, I need to make this code execute. After the 10 seconds have passed, I want this code to be executed. So these two lines must be executed in another, let's say, time frame. So how can I do this if I'm always writing code like this? I'm writing on a top-down approach, line after line. I have only 2 dimensions in my code editor, so I cannot really put my code aside or do something else. So I have to find a syntax that will enable me to run this asynchronous command, and after this happens, I will have to execute this command, which must be completed after the timer. So in this point, JavaScript creators introduce what is called the callback. So the callback means that it's an instruction to JavaScript, and especially to asynchronous commands that say, okay, let's say start a timer, okay, and after 10 seconds, execute this function. This function is called a callback. This is a term. So I declare a function. I can give any name I want. Okay, callback, it's not the name of the function. Callback, it's the case where we use a function with an asynchronous command. So in this point, I can move this code here. And now this code will be executed only after this asynchronous command finishes. So let's make this, let's refresh this one. So as you can see, the code runs from top to bottom, client X, show news, show weather, the user sees everything. And then after 10 seconds, this asynchronous command runs, gets executed, finishes, and then the callback comes and runs the code that we want. So in order to deal with this kind of asynchronous command and write in a way, in a fashion that enable us to run some code after the execution of some non-blocking or asynchronous command, the callback term is introduced. So a callback is a function that can be named whatever we want. and gets executed once some kind of asynchronous code runs. It's called callback. Okay, we refer to these functions as callbacks because we give them the instruction, okay, go do a task, like set a timer for 10 seconds, and when this task finishes, call us back, come back to us and inform us that this task has finished. So this is why we use quite often the term callback for this kind of functions. These are ordinary functions. Okay, as you can see, there's nothing different in declaring or writing the code. But since they do not run instantly, but they run after some asynchronous code finishes, and they, let's say, call us back, we call them callbacks. So this is how asynchronous code got introduced into JavaScript, and we are able to run things that might take a lot of time to be accomplished or to finish out of the way, and the rest of the code can easily continue its execution without being blocked. So I will just say now again, so async command. So you can think of as when you, in your code, you find an async command, like set timeout. Set timeout is a real JavaScript command. You can think of that this command is taken aside, is being put aside. It starts executing, okay? The timer starts here at this point, but it does not block the rest of the execution, the rest of the program. It starts executing, it gives the turn to the next commands. These commands run, and then after 10 seconds, the callback gets executed. Now, after 10 seconds, and probably after the execution of the whole program, this function callback will be executed, and we will see this result. So let's go into questions, which I expect you to have a lot. So Nikos asks, how we distinguish them from the normal functions? What is the sign, the timeout? This is a perfect question. This is a great question. So at this point, unfortunately, there's no like easy answer. We have to learn about these commands. For example, one of the first things we learn when we learn JavaScript is that the set timeout command and the set interval commands are asynchronous commands. So I think probably the only way is just to learn about these asynchronous commands through the documentation or through the material that you go through. You just have to learn. There is no clear sign, to be honest. In JavaScript, the asynchronous commands are just few, so you will have to learn. I'm not sure about the number. It might be like 5, 6, 7. I'm not sure. And apart from the built-in commands, which are really, really just a few, and you can easily learn about these commands. When you use a command from a third party, let's say a creator, like a library or an extension or framework or some other JavaScript code, you will, of course, have to go through the documentation and see if the commands that are given to you are asynchronous or synchronous. The author of the code must tell you that I have put this code together and these commands are asynchronous, so you have to deal with them with callbacks or various other ways. There are other ways to deal with asynchronous code. The callbacks were the first thing that was introduced to the language. Armando says, yes, exactly, that there's another asynchronous command. I will put a button on the HTML. And by the way, for those of you who came in later, I'm going to paste the live sandbox code so that you can see while I'm writing. So Armando, you are right. When we use the event listener, so let's say that we query selector. So, okay, I will work on the code later. So add event listener is another asynchronous command. Why? Because the add event listener waits for an event to happen. The click event needs to happen from the user in order for the for some code to be executed. So if I want to, let's say, alert a message to the user once they click on the button, I will have to wait for this click event to happen, and this might not happen at all. In this exactly in this situation, we will use, instead of making this add event listener command blocking or synchronous, because what if the user never clicks? The rest of the program won't execute. Okay, if this was a blocking or a synchronous command, the program would wait for years and years until the user clicked on the button, and then the alert command would get executed, and then the news and the weather would be displayed. So instead of making this a blocking command, we make it an asynchronous or non-blocking, and we use the callback, and we can place a function in here. Let me make this a little bit. So this is asynchronous, which means that it starts its execution, but it is moved out of the way. So the rest of the command will be displayed, as you can see, news, weather. And now the add event listener will wait for a click to happen. If it doesn't happen at all, there's no problem. No code will be blocked. And when the click event happens, this callback function will be executed. So as you can see, let's rerun the code. This will happen only when I click. So one of the most common and commonly used asynchronous commands in JavaScript is the add event listener, which we'll go through in detail in the next part of this presentation. Vaso asks, we take the asynchronous commands from the documentation of a library, but it is not easy to create our own, like any function. We can create our own asynchronous functions. I wouldn't say it's either easy or hard. It's just that you have to learn the syntax, but you quite easily create asynchronous functions on your own. So we won't be touching this part during this session, but you can also create your own asynchronous commands. For now, we'll just say that you have to learn how to spot the built-in asynchronous commands like set timeout, set interval, add event listener, and when you switch to a, let's say, a library or a framework or the JavaScript code from some other author, you have to go through the documentation and see if you find something that is asynchronous and needs to be handled with either a callback or different methods. There are other ways also to deal with asynchronous code. We are going it step by step. So this is a great question. So let me, I want to keep these questions. So can we create async commands ourselves? The answer is yes, the quick answer, but we won't be covering this during this session. So set timeout, set interval, add event listener. What other built-in async? Let's do a quick Google. I think there are async function. I'm not sure there's a list of the built-in set timeout. In JavaScript, there are just a few of them. Grant, no, okay. So right now I cannot think of another one. Add event listener. Yes, there is a fetch, set timeout, and set interval. Event listener. So we have fetch. We haven't touched fetch yet, but it's also another asynchronous command. And you'll just have to walk through the documentation, and as you learn, you will be told about which commands are asynchronous and must be handled with callbacks or some other way. So just to recap and probably take a quick break, there's a situation where we might have some kind of commands that might take a long time to finish upon their execution, and this command can block our code if we place them inside, let's say, somewhere inside in the middle of our code. If they take too much time to be executed and finished, they will block the rest of the code. The rest of the application won't run. So in order to tackle this issue, the asynchronous commands, the asynchronous code was introduced into JavaScript. And one of the first way that we deal with this kind of asynchronous commands, it is that we execute the commands. We supply a callback function, a function that will be called, that will get executed once this asynchronous command finishes the whole process. And we have three examples from in here. The set timeout takes a function reference, and be careful, we are not executing the function here. We're just passing a reference of a function to this command, okay? We don't need this show command to be executed right on line 9. We want set timeout to take care of the execution of show. We're just saying here, set timeout, take this function and call it whenever you finish. So it is the task of set timeout to execute show, to put the parentheses and execute, okay? So somewhere inside the setTime function, which is a built-in command, there is a clock ticking, and after 10 seconds, the first argument is executed like this. So set timeout will start a timer, and after 10 seconds, it will take the first argument, put the parentheses here, and the function will get executed. Likewise, in the add event listener, we have a different, as you can see, we have a different syntax. We have the name of the event first, and the callback function is placed as a second argument. So this is quite different from the set timeout or set interval, but the idea is the same. Wait, let event listener listen on click events, and when the click event happens, execute this function. So this function will be executed by placing two parentheses, and the code inside here will run again and again.